So about 2 years ago or so, I made a mistake, okay? And my mistake was this: I actually bought a home and I find myself basically, do I sell this home or do I rent it? Or do I sell this home, buy another home? Or for example, do I sell this home and just basically go ahead and rent? There seems to be like a lot of options here, but what I've learned is from a few years of experiences, it's better to have options than no options at all. Now, 2 years ago, I moved to Puerto Rico for tax incentives, the same one that Logan Paul is under, which they're great and it kind of helps out the economy in Puerto Rico. But overall, for me, I find myself wanting to move back home to the Dominican Republic after 21 years of not even living here as a full-time resident. But to me, it seems to be the best possible decision at this very moment. Now, by the way, something amazing also happened when I was actually in Puerto Rico. God showed grace, I became a Christian, and that is by far the best thing that ever happened to me, okay? Now, overall, here's what I'll tell you guys about in this video. I'll go over absolutely everything. Why I bought a home and why that was a mistake, okay? On top of that, what exactly am I going to do next with all the money I'm going to receive if I do sell this home and everything else, okay? So as always, guys, like this video. On top of that, also subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified. Now, the first question that people are probably going to be wondering is basically, Tommy, why don't you keep this home and make some passive income? Because by the way, my decision has been, after talking to, for example, some people, has been just, hey, I'm going to sell this home and take the cash. I'll tell you what I'm going to do with the cash later on this video, but I'm going to sell the home. And you might ask me, Tommy, why not rent it and get passive income? And since the home is paid for in cash, all that money is yours to keep. Well, first of all, here's the first reason. This home is a plane ride away from me because I'm going to live in Dominican Republic. That's in Puerto Rico. If I were living here, would I buy a home in Puerto Rico? The answer would probably be no. Just wouldn't make sense. Usually when you want to buy a rental property, you want to buy in a market that you know, that you live kind of close to, that you can kind of like just get there on time and everything like that. But having a property that's a plane ride away, something breaks down, tenant stuff goes crazy, then what am I going to do then? Number two is, when I bought this home, I did not buy this home with the purpose of it being an investment property. That means the remodeling process was a lot more different. If it was just going to be for renting, I would have not bought like the things that I bought, like make it a little more fancy, you know what I mean? I would have just made it very average, done the bare minimum, and that way people can live there, break stuff, replace it, no big deal. But that's not what I did. Now, if I were to rent this home that is fancy and I put tenants in there and they break things down, that's going to be very expensive. Now, number three, also, if I were to go ahead and basically rent this home, my return on my investment would just be about 6.6%, which is actually not that great. I would want to make at least 8%, okay? That's what I'm looking for. So because of all these reasons, that's one big thing, one big reason why I'm not going to be keeping it and renting it. Instead, I'm going to be selling it and doing something else with that money. Again, when you're looking to buy something, you usually want to buy somewhere in your area when you first start out. That way, it is easy to manage it. That is way it's basically easy to just go over there if anything happens, right? In case of an emergency. But when something is basically a plane ride away or in a different place altogether, that's not probably the way I would have done it to begin with. So that's not the way I'm going to do it right now. Now, number two, guys, which is basically, Tommy, why will you be renting and not buying in place? Well, let me tell you guys something, okay, guys? At the time, I really felt like that was the best decision ever, okay? I just moved from New York. I needed a change in my environment. I needed to move out from my mom's place, obviously, because I wanted to basically just be more independent and so on. And those were all great reasons or whatever. But at the time, it felt like the most logical reason to go ahead and live in Puerto Rico. And once I was there for like a year, I said, I really want to buy a place because in reality, I'm going to be here for another 5 years or so, even potentially even more. So buying a place mathematically made sense in that time right there. But now, when I think about it, and if I do move, for example, to here, Dominican Republic, and I find myself with the cash, does it make sense to go ahead and buy a property right away? The answer is no, because obviously you want to take the time to see exactly, well, where would you want to live? Where will you want to actually establish some roots, right? And for me personally, I think I'm just going to rent for like the next 5 years, or maybe less, maybe more, but I plan on buying a home when I need a home. When I have, for example, a family that I want to get started on, and maybe my wife wants a home and she wants to have this whole thing, I'll go ahead and I buy a home. And when the math actually makes sense, for most of the places, okay, you can probably get away with just renting and it not be as expensive as buying for like 5 years, depending on the math. And overall, right now, currently, I just don't need a home, okay? So just renting would just be less expensive, more convenient, and also just more flexible overall. Because once you buy a home, well, that's bought. Now you have a whole selling process, and that can be a whole torment, okay, potentially. Now, number three, guys, is basically, Tommy, if this home does sell, what are you gonna do with this money, okay? Are you gonna use this money to buy rental property? Are you gonna use it to put into the stock market? What exactly are you gonna do with this cash? My answer is a simple one, guys. I used to be very afraid of holding on to cash because basically it kind of just felt like if you hold on to cash, inflation will eat it up. But that's not really how it works, okay? It's not just like you hold cash that same day your money's gone. No, it takes time for your money to lose, for example, its buying power. If you're holding money for more than 5 years, usually you're gonna see a big problem, okay? But for me personally, here's some not so real numbers, okay? So if I were to sell this home, let's say for 180K, I'll probably grab 100K and keep that money in the bank, okay? That money would kind of be like money to buy my next home and pay for it in cash, because here in the Dominican Republic, I could buy a pretty nice place or apartment with that money and it'll be just fine. Now, the other part of the money, I could use that money, for example, to put into my investment account, or I could use that money, for example, to put into rental properties. Now, right now, currently, I'm leaning more towards putting that money to work in rental properties. And the answer is a very simple one. With that money, I could probably buy like 2 properties potentially. With 2 properties, I can produce, for example, some monthly cash flow. And the big reason why that's so important to me is basically stock market is great, okay? But I really don't want to interrupt it. I really don't want to take money out. So for me, putting that money in there, and then eventually if I do need that cash for something, then it's going to be an issue. But if I can actually find like a good return on investment property, let's say for example, I can invest 100K into real estate and I can basically make like, let's say 8% on that. Well, $8,000 a year, you divide that by 12, that's about $666. Here in the Dominican Republic, that's going to be around 36,000 pesos, and that is a good amount of money because you can basically rent a place for 25,000 pesos. Now you're left with $11,000. Now that 11,000 pesos is enough, for example, to buy groceries, right? So now that's basically taken care of. And if you have a paid off cash, well, a paid off a paid off car, and you have, for example, no debt, well, what do you have to pay now? You have to pay, for example, utilities, and you have to pay, for example, gas and maintenance. But your basic expenses can be basically covered just by that, okay? So to me, it makes the most sense to having cash flow that if I were to need it at a certain point, I could just use that cash flow and not have to be reliant on selling investments. Now, at the time, if I don't need that cash, what I probably will do, honestly, is keep that cash, let it accumulate, use that cash to buy more property, use that cash to buy more property while I'm still investing with my normal income into the stock market. This way, you kind of build up a reserve in the stock market, which is great for the future. And you also build up, for example, some rental properties to give you cash flow in case, for example, something happens to your income. And to me, that is super important. Now, with that cash also, I could also use it to build up even a bigger emergency account to about 3 years. That's one of my goals. And if you have 3 years worth of emergency account money, that's a lot, right? So you got 3 years to kind of figure out exactly what's going to be the next move, okay? And you can kind of just like wait and see how things develop because you don't have to be that worried about things, okay? So to me, this makes the most sense and it's the most logical plan. And when I look back, I could say, wow, I made a mistake. But when I was actually at that point, it seemed like the best decision, and that's why I love that book, man. It's called The Psychology of Money, and it tells you that basically people aren't crazy. When people make a decision at that very moment with all the information they have, it seems to be the most logical decision. But as people grow and change and basically they kind of just like care about different things tend to change. If I move from Puerto Rico, it's going to be, for example, a big hit, for example, tax wise. And I won't go into detail on that because I'll make a video on that later on. But overall, it's going to be a change. But I'm not the same person I used to be like 2, 3 years ago. So things have changed a lot. So that's why you have to stay flexible in your plan. And the best way to stay flexible is not to have, for example, a high leverage lifestyle. That's why I don't spend that much money. That's why I don't have any debt. That's why I kind of operate the way I operate. So this way I don't have to worry about that many things. Guys, as always, thanks for watching this video. I hope this helps, and I hope you don't just buy a house because you just feel like it's the next right decision to make, or you just kind of take it slow. It's okay to rent for a while. That's what I kind of learned with time. And also, renting for 5 years allows my money to grow even more, allows me to diversify into cash flow and stuff. So it just makes the most sense, you know. That's what I would say. And I remember Warren Buffett said once, you know, when do you buy a house? When you need a home. And that's the smartest thing you could possibly do. Going ahead and buying something right ahead is usually a bad decision. What's the rush for? Take your time. Use a rent versus buy calculator. And once the math makes sense, you know exactly where you want to live. You know where you want to set your roots, and you're basically getting started and you want to say, hey, I want to have a family, whatever. That makes the most sense. Or even if you're like a single person, you're like, hey, I know I'm going to be here for like 5, 10 years or so, and you're really sure about that, you can buy a little apartment, like 2 bedroom, 1 bedroom, maybe with a little bit more growth in there, like 2 bedrooms. And then you can say, hey, I'm going to stay here for a while. I'm going to buy this property. I'm going to, you know, the math makes sense. It makes sense. But don't just buy things just based on, hey, it's just the next decision to make. No. Run the numbers and make sure it makes sense, okay? As always, guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe, comment down below, made it, so you made it all the way to the end of the video. Over here is another banger. Over here's my face. Go subscribe, and as always, long-term team out, and video coming soon on Puerto Rico versus Dominican Republic on why exactly I'm making this move. All right, peace.